Welcome back. In this video, we're going to take a look at some different techniques to work with animation data, specifically when it comes to the curve editor. And we're going to take a look at shot 40. So in our project here, I'm inside of shot number 40 right here. This is the level sequence I've opened, and we're taking a look at the characters running down the corridor. Now I'm going to go ahead and just work with the anim work project. I've also muted the baked animation subsequence, and I've brought back up the control rig live anim work subsequence, because inside of here is the beta character with all of the original keyframe data from the original animator. So with this in mind, there's one other thing I want to do, and that is to actually add a camera cuts track into this sequence right here. I don't have an easy way to get in and out of this camera view, and so if I add a camera cut track, because I'm sort of breadcrumbing my way back down into this level sequence, this subsequence here, I am able to access the camera using this camera cut track, boop, to get in and out. Now this works even though I don't have a camera in this particular sequence, because I'm loaded in through this larger sequence, and this larger sequence actually has the camera in it. So because I'm in a sequence with a camera and then I'm deeper into a subsequence, by adding a camera cuts track, I can still access that camera from the above inherited level sequence. So a little tip for you there. Now, that's just giving me a little button that I can get in and out of the camera. It's not super important for what we're doing today, but I find it useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my beta character, and I'm going to twirl them down and click on the control rig. This will automatically kick me into animation mode if I'm not already there. But if you're like, wait a minute, where's my rig? Try hitting G. G is game mode, and it's the thing that always shows and hides control rigs, and it might be the easiest way to get lost of like, where are my controls? Anyways, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to modify some of the animation data, but before we do, I'm going to show you some different techniques I like to use when animating in Unreal Engine. So I'm going to grab the body control for beta, the character running around here. Now the body control is sort of the main thing driving the character's motion, and I'm going to use the LZ, which is the up and down. Now he has this up and down bounce as he runs around. I've even messed with this in a previous video where I made him, I've adjusted the way that the up and down works. But before I make any changes, let me give you a tip. I want to buffer curve everything. I want to basically have Unreal take a snapshot of whatever these curves currently look like, so I can always get back to them if I don't like my changes later. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and do that for the entire character. Now I could select all the controls a couple different ways. I could drag select, do a marquee select and just try to grab everything this way. That's going to grab everything that's visible, but then there's some stuff that might be hidden. So one thing I like to do is over here in the top right corner, we have our anim outliner. When I select a control, it'll also show things in the anim details down here. But what I can do is where we have beta control rig. By the way, there's more stuff up here because we have gamma in the shot as well, which is the little four-legged quadruped character. But I'm specifically working with the big guy. So I'm going to find beta. Here's his control rig, and I'm going to alt-click on the beta control rig. Alt-clicking will almost act like a selection set, and it'll grab everything inside of that selection, that section. I can also just alt-click on spine, for example, and it'll grab everything inside of the spine hierarchy and down. Now you'll notice it's grabbing everything down below it, which is, helpful potentially. But if you're just like, oh, I wish I could just alt click on arm and just get the arm things. I don't want all the finger controls and everything else. I just want the arm section. You can do that. I can switch my anim outliner up here in the top left corner. There's a little drop down where I can flatten the modules. And if I flatten the modules, it actually sort of takes away some of the hierarchy behaviors of this editor. So now I have the beta control rig, and you can see I have the spine stuff, the neck stuff, all these different things, for example, the arm, and they're no longer cascading down into a different hierarchy system. So now if I alt click on left arm, it'll actually just grab that section. So now I've just created a way to use selection sets inside of my anim outliner. Very handy. Now, for what I'm trying to show you here, this does not help us. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. I'm going to go back and I'm going to unflatten the modules. And now I'm going to go back and just say alt click on the control rig as a whole. That grabs everything in my character, all the different controls, hidden or not, they're all selected, right? Lots of stuff grabbed. I'm going to go back to my sequencer curves. Lots of things here on the curve editor. Just grab everything. I'm going to right click and I'm going to buffer curves. There's a lot of different curves here, so I'll just buffer all of them. Boop. And what that's going to do is, in case you're not familiar with buffer curves, maybe you've done this in Maya, maybe this is new to you, What buffer curves allow you to do, if I select my body control, I can show you. I'll specify just the LZ, the up and the down, right? The bounce of his run. And what this will do is, if I make a change to something, maybe I want to have him jump higher, I'll just move these curves up like that. And you'll see I'm left with the ghost of animation past, right? These little ghost icons of where these curves used to be. When I make changes, whether I delete curves, whether I change the timing of things, whether I just change the values, whatever, I can see where the animation data used to be. Whenever I did that snapshot, that's what the buffer curve is holding in place. And if I make a bunch of changes and say, oh, you know what? I don't like what I've done. I wish I could go back. It's a really easy way to, instead of Control Z undoing a million times, I can just select the curve, right click, and say swap buffer curves. Boop. And it sends me back to the version I had previously. Now you can see that I now have a ghost of where I just had changed things to, right? So I'm allowed to have one snapshot per curve buffered at any given moment. So I'll go ahead and swap it back, right? Now, if I want to say, you know what, discard what I'm currently doing, just set me back to whatever's currently in the buffer, whatever the current ghost is, I can say apply, boop, and it'll set me back to whatever the ghost is. So you have to keep in mind which one you have ghosted, whether it's your current or your new stuff, right? Or the old or the new, whatever. But buffer curves are really, really handy in keeping the workflow in a non-destructive spirit. It's a destructive workflow in that I am changing the animation curves, but I can easily go back or at least compare with what was originally there, which makes my life a lot easier. And if I want to say, oh, you know what, I want to change this and, you know, I like this curve more now, I wish I could just make this the new buffer, that's fine too. Right click, just do a new buffer curve, boop, makes a new snapshot. And so that will now be what it holds in memory. So that's the first thing when you're dealing with a lot of different keyframe data. And that's the thing, that's why I grabbed every single control on the character, because if I go grab his head control, you can see that his head control also has buffer curves for everything, right? So every single thing on this character is now buffered. Now, I don't believe this will persist if you close Unreal and reopen it. I think you need to buffer every time. I think that's the same in most tools. But while you're working here, super, super handy. Now, the next thing I want to show you are a couple just easy filters, things you should know about when working with animation data. I'm going to just keep focused on the body control. And actually, let me jump back into my camera view so I can track with the character, right? Here he is running around. And actually, let's maybe mess with the rotation instead. So let's say I were doing something with the rotation channels in X, Y, and Z. First of all, graph editor, a couple things you want to know. If I select rotation controls, I can hit this button here, or I can right click and go to Euler filter, or I can also go to filter and find Euler filter here. 3 different ways to get to the same thing. The Euler filter is a very, very commonly known and very useful tool that you'll find in almost every graph editor in 3D. Helps with over rotations, gimbal lock issues, different things like that. You're going to want to know where that is. So that's where that lives. You can also access a variety of different filters by hitting this button or right clicking and going to filter. And this is where you're going to find all kinds of useful things. Fourier transforms are going to have things for high pass and low pass, basically smoothing algorithms. You can go to Butterworth here, a popular smoothing algorithm. There's also Simplify, Smart Reduce. There's a bunch of different things here you might want to know about. But not everything is similar to where here we have these tolerance sliders. Smart Reduce, we can adjust these values. Some operations, like the Euler filter or the Smart Snap, don't have settings. You just hit them and you hit apply. Let me give an example of what some of these things can do. Let's say that I'm dealing with a lot of the keyframes. I'll go ahead and just grab everything on Beta's control rig, right? Lots of data, alt click on that, get everything. Let's say that for whatever reason, I want to deal with all of the animation data all at once. Now I can change the view mode to maybe normalized mode, and that'll show me all the keyframe data in one big spaghetti soup. Probably not that helpful, but you know what? We're gonna do it. If I pull all this up, it's a little bit sluggish because I've got thousands of keyframes on, thousands of keyframes on thousands of controls, a lot of data selected. I can go to bake, and you might know bake is something that you can do where you take a curve, and actually maybe I'll show you this one at a time. If I take the body control and I take just one of these things, if I take a curve and I select it and I hit bake, it'll add keys on every single frame of that curve. That's typically what we know bakes to be. However, we can also, in mass, I can grab every single thing on this character, get everything to populate. I'll grab all the different keyframes, and we can reduce bake. I can use the bake tool and change the interval from bake on ones to maybe say, bake every 5 frames. And if I now say, go ahead and apply that, it will now bake the animation data on 5s. And even though it already had, more dense data, it now reduces the density of the data. And so now it's taken my animation, baked it down onto 5s, and it's a little bit of an odd way to do things, but maybe if I, I'll focus in on just the body for a second. And you can see here what this has done. If I focus on just the LZ once again, this is why buffer curves are really handy. That just reduced the density of my keyframes by a lot. But if you're like, oh no, maybe I've lost some useful information. A lot of the running still works, right? He's still running, but we've definitely lost some of that zest. That's what the buffer curves are useful for, because now we can compare, maybe I'll go back to the absolute view here. We can compare whatever the curve currently looks like to what it was before. So if I need to come and change maybe the up and down, maybe that 5 keyframes was a little bit low resolution for some of the data here. I can easily go back and through the buffer curve, I can see where the data used to be. So, if I need to make some adjustments, tweak some timings, tweak some values, it makes it pretty easy to see where I came from and, what I might want to preserve if I need to make some adjustments. So now, I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful. It's a little bit of an odd use case to show you this, but the main thing I wanted to show you is that you can take really dense keyframe data and you can use the bake tool, not just to bake animation down on ones, but to unbake it to a more sparse key management situation. And by combining that with buffer curves, it allows you to see what the data looked like before and after. That way, if you need to make any adjustments, maybe you had something useful that, oh, we lost this extreme right here on this frame. I can just kind of tweak the timing of some of these and, keep a little bit more of that spirit intact. And the last thing I'll mention, we will cover this in a future video, but I just want to point out that here in the Curve Editor, the other thing that you will probably notice is that we have a wonderful tween tool, right? Already built in here inside of our Curve Editor. We do have one up here in the tween button here. This will give us one for our viewport, all the different modes. We also have this one down here, and these can be set to different things. There's a bunch of great hotkeys. We'll cover it more in depth, but these tween tools, super, super handy for blending and adjusting curves, not just individually, but as a whole. We have all kinds of cool things, lots of different options. The one that I'll point out to you just really quickly, I'll go ahead and just keep using my up and down. This time I'm actually going to go and turn off the buffer curves. I don't want to see them right now, so I'll turn that off and then I'll reselect my curve. Now the buffer curve stuff is gone, out of the way. One thing when you're doing with a lot of keys, for example, all the different stuff I had on this character, I can set this to smooth and rough. And what that's going to do, if I select all these curves, if I go to smooth, it'll start to reduce the amount of contrast from key to key, or rough will add contrast. And so this is a quick way I can just keep click, 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 and I'll smooth out the animation overall, or click, 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 add more bumpiness to it. And so if you're dealing with lots of keyframe data, one of the really common use cases of that is something like motion capture, where maybe you have some jittery or buzzy motion capture, and the smooth rough tween tool can be really, really handy, especially in that combination with buffer curves. And of course, one last thing, just to show you this, I can select everything on this character once again, grab all of the keyframe data, right click, and I can just say, hey, swap buffer curves. And this will set everything in this animation back to the original way that I had it. So now, even though I baked everything down to 5s and changed all kinds of stuff, I can pretty much go back to any control, and it's gonna have all the original animation data before I baked, before anything went weird, and I'm back to normal. Super easy. Hopefully that was helpful, a good general overview of some of the really common things you might want to find in the Curve Editor. In the next video, we're going to talk animation layers for a even more non-destructive approach to editing animation data. See you there.